In the spring of 1943, the Axis powers, emboldened by their early successes in Europe, tightened their grip on the Balkan Peninsula, with Albania emerging as a critical strategic foothold. The mountainous terrain, characterized by its rugged peaks and deep valleys, offered both challenges and opportunities for military operations. Yet, as German forces occupied this small nation, they overlooked a vital component of their control: the local population, particularly the shepherds who had thrived in these harsh landscapes for generations. The shepherds, custodians of the land, had long navigated the intricate web of mountain paths and hidden valleys, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of nature. They were not merely passive observers of the unfolding conflict; rather, they were deeply attuned to the movements of the occupiers, possessing an intimate knowledge of the terrain that would soon prove invaluable. The German commanders, however, steeped in the arrogance of their military superiority, dismissed these local inhabitants as inconsequential, viewing them as mere peasants unworthy of serious consideration. As German convoys laden with supplies and munitions traversed the Albanian mountains, the shepherds began to recognize the potential for resistance. Their lives, once dictated by the care of their flocks, were now overshadowed by the foreign presence that threatened their homeland. The Axis forces, focused on maintaining their supply lines and asserting control over key cities such as Elbasan and Gjirokastër, failed to perceive the simmering discontent among the local populace. The shepherds, armed with their knowledge of the land and a growing resolve to reclaim their autonomy, were poised to challenge the occupiers in ways that would soon reverberate throughout the region. By the time the snow receded from the mountain tops and the days lengthened, the shepherds began to gather in secret, away from the prying eyes of the occupiers. These clandestine meetings marked the inception of a coordinated effort to disrupt the German supply lines. The shepherds' understanding of the land, honed through generations of living in harmony with its rhythms, would become a decisive advantage in the struggle against the Axis powers. In the face of overwhelming odds, the shepherds transformed from passive observers into active participants in the resistance movement. Their intimate knowledge of the terrain allowed them to plan ambushes and gather intelligence on the movements of German convoys. As whispers of defiance spread through the villages, the shepherds emerged as leaders, rallying their fellow countrymen to join Norway's fight for freedom. The Axis commanders, oblivious to the growing threat, continued to underestimate the shepherds, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test the resolve and ingenuity of the Albanian people. To understand the significance of the Albanian resistance in 1943, one must first appreciate the geographical and historical context of Albania itself. Nestled in the Western Balkans, Albania is characterized by its rugged mountains, dense forests, and a coastline along the Adriatic Sea. The country's topography, with its steep slopes and narrow valleys, has shaped the lives of its inhabitants for centuries. The shepherds, who have traditionally roamed these mountains with their flocks, possess an unparalleled understanding of the land, which would soon become a crucial asset in the fight against the Axis powers. Historically, Albania has been a land of diverse influences, having been shaped by Illyrian, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman rule. This rich tapestry of history fostered a strong sense of national identity among the Albanian people, who have long cherished their autonomy and cultural heritage. By the time World War II erupted, Albania had already experienced significant upheaval, having declared independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1912. The interwar years were marked by political instability, culminating in the establishment of a monarchy under King Zog I, whose reign was characterized by efforts to modernize the country amidst external pressures. The Italian invasion of Albania in April 1939 marked the beginning of a tumultuous period for the nation. The Italians sought to establish a foothold in the Balkans, viewing Albania as a strategic asset in their imperial ambitions. The occupation was met with resistance, but it was not until the Axis powers, particularly Germany, took control following Italy's capitulation in September 1943 that the situation escalated dramatically. The German High Command recognized Albania's strategic importance, particularly its proximity to key supply routes and its potential as a base for operations in the Balkans. By the time the German forces established their occupation, they implemented a regime of terror, seeking to suppress any dissent and maintain control over the local population. The imposition of harsh measures, including forced labor and requisitioning of food and resources, only served to deepen the resentment among the Albanian people. The shepherds, who had long relied on the land for their livelihoods, found themselves increasingly marginalized and oppressed. This growing discontent laid the groundwork for a burgeoning resistance movement. In the spring of 1943, as the Axis powers tightened their grip on the region, the shepherds began to organize themselves into small, mobile units capable of striking at the heart of the German supply lines. Their knowledge of the land allowed them to navigate the treacherous terrain with ease, while their deep-rooted connections to their communities provided them with the support needed to sustain their efforts. The shepherds became the backbone of the resistance, serving as scouts, guides, and fighters, united by a common goal: to reclaim their homeland from foreign occupation. The logistics of the resistance were as complex as the terrain itself. The shepherds utilized their intimate understanding of the land to establish communication networks, sharing information about German troop movements and convoy schedules. They relied on the support of local villages, who provided shelter, food, and intelligence. This grassroots organization allowed the resistance to operate effectively, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The shepherds, once seen as simple farmers, emerged as strategic leaders, demonstrating that local knowledge and determination could challenge even the most advanced military forces. As April 1943 unfolded, the resistance prepared for a confrontation that would test the resolve of the Albanian people. The shepherds, armed with their knowledge of the land and a growing sense of purpose, began to strike back against their occupiers. The Axis commanders, still dismissive of the local population, remained oblivious to the growing threat posed by the resistance. This underestimation would soon prove to be their undoing, as the shepherds prepared to launch a series of coordinated attacks that would disrupt the German supply lines and inspire a broader movement for freedom. In late May 1943, the Albanian resistance launched its first major offensive against the German occupiers. The target was a German supply convoy making its way through the narrow mountain passes between Elbasan and Gjirokastër. This convoy, laden with supplies and munitions, represented the lifeline of the occupying forces, and its disruption would send a powerful message of defiance. The shepherds, with their intimate knowledge of the terrain, played a crucial role in planning the ambush. They had spent weeks gathering intelligence on the convoy movements, noting the timing and composition of the supply trucks. Armed with this information, they devised a plan to strike at the convoy's most vulnerable point, using their familiarity with the mountain paths to their advantage. The ambush was meticulously planned, with each resistance fighter assigned a specific role. The shepherds, armed with rifles and homemade explosives, positioned themselves strategically along the convoy's route. Their understanding of the terrain allowed them to strike with precision, targeting the supply trucks and causing maximum disruption. When the convoy made its way through the narrow mountain pass, the resistance fighters sprang into action. The first shots rang out, echoing through the mountains, as the shepherds targeted the lead truck. The element of surprise was complete, and the German soldiers, caught off guard, struggled to mount a defense. The ambush was a resounding success, resulting in significant losses for the Germans. Several supply trucks were destroyed, and the convoy was forced to retreat, leaving behind a trail of wreckage. The shepherds, having achieved their objective, melted away into the mountains, leaving the occupiers bewildered and frustrated. The success of the ambush instilled a newfound confidence among the Albanian resistance fighters. The shepherds, once dismissed as mere peasants, had demonstrated their ability to outmaneuver and outsmart the occupying forces. Their knowledge of the land, coupled with their determination to reclaim their homeland, had proven to be a formidable combination. The German commanders, still dismissive of the local population, attributed the ambush to mere bad luck. They failed to recognize the growing threat posed by the resistance, viewing the incident as an isolated event rather than a sign of things to come. This underestimation would soon prove costly, as the resistance prepared to escalate its operations. The ambush marked a turning point in the Albanian resistance, signaling the beginning of a sustained campaign against the Axis powers. The shepherds, once seen as simple farmers, had become symbols of resilience and ingenuity, demonstrating that local knowledge could outsmart even the most advanced military strategies. During the resistance fighters regrouped and prepared for their next offensive, the German occupiers remained oblivious to the growing threat. Their focus remained on maintaining control over the region, and they continued to underestimate the shepherds' capabilities. This derision would soon prove to be their undoing, as the resistance prepared to launch a series of coordinated attacks that would further disrupt the German supply lines. The success of the ambush reverberated through the ranks of the resistance. News of the attack spread quickly among the local population, igniting a spirit of defiance that had been simmering beneath the surface. The shepherds, emboldened by their victory, began to recruit more fighters from the villages, drawing in young men eager to join the struggle against the occupiers. In the days that followed, the resistance fighters met in secret, sharing their experiences and strategizing for future operations. They understood that the ambush was just the beginning. To achieve lasting success, they needed to establish a network of support among the local population. The shepherds began to forge alliances with other groups, including former partisans and disillusioned soldiers from the Axis forces, who were eager to join the fight for Albanian independence. The German response to the ambush was swift. They launched a series of retaliatory strikes against villages suspected of harboring resistance fighters. These punitive measures, however, only served to galvanize the local population. Rather than instilling fear, the brutality of the German response reinforced the resolve of the Albanian people to resist. The shepherds, who had once been seen as mere farmers, were now viewed as heroes, leading the charge against oppression. As the summer of 1943 approached, the resistance began to coordinate more complex operations. The shepherds, with their deep understanding of the land, devised plans that involved multiple ambushes along the same convoy route, creating a web of attacks that would confuse and demoralize the German forces. They also began to utilize the natural features of the landscape to their advantage, using caves and hidden paths to evade capture and launch surprise attacks. The German commanders, still underestimating the capabilities of the resistance, continued to send convoys through the mountain passes, believing that increased military presence would deter further attacks. However, the shepherds were undeterred. They had learned from their first ambush and were now more adept at executing their plans with precision and stealth. The next major operation was set for early June, targeting a convoy that was expected to carry not only supplies but also reinforcements for the German troops stationed in Albania. The shepherds gathered intelligence on the convoy's route, timing, and composition, meticulously planning their ambush to maximize impact. They knew that this operation could be a game-changer, potentially crippling the German military presence in the region. As the day of the ambush approached, tension mounted among the resistance fighters. They understood the stakes. Failure could mean severe reprisals from the Germans, while success could embolden their cause and inspire even more locals to join the fight. The shepherds, once seen as simple farmers, had transformed into skilled guerrilla fighters, united by a common goal, the liberation of their homeland. On the day of the ambush, the resistance fighters took their positions along the convoy route, hidden among the rocks and trees. As the convoy approached, the air was thick with anticipation. The first truck rolled into view, and the shepherds held their breath, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the lead vehicle was within range, they unleashed a barrage of gunfire, targeting the drivers and soldiers with deadly accuracy. The chaos that ensued was unlike anything the Germans had encountered before. The resistance fighters, trained in the art of ambush, moved quickly and decisively, targeting the supply trucks and cutting off any chance of escape for the German soldiers. The ambush was a resounding success, with multiple trucks destroyed and the convoy forced to retreat in disarray. The aftermath of the ambush was a scene of devastation. The once proud German convoy lay in ruins, a testament to the effectiveness of the Albanian resistance. As the shepherds melted away into the mountains, they left behind a message that would resonate throughout the region: the occupiers were not invincible, and the spirit of resistance burned brightly among the Albanian people. In the weeks that followed, the German command scrambled to respond to the growing threat posed by the resistance. They increased their military presence in the region, deploying additional troops and resources to secure the supply routes. However, the shepherds, emboldened by their victories, continued to strike with precision, launching a series of coordinated attacks that further disrupted the German supply lines. The psychological impact of these ambushes was profound. German soldiers, once confident in their superiority, began to question their safety and the effectiveness of their command. The once quiet mountain passes had transformed into a battleground, and the shepherds, once dismissed as inconsequential, had become symbols of resilience and defiance. As the summer of 1943 progressed, the Albanian resistance continued to grow in strength and sophistication. The shepherds, with their intimate knowledge of the land and their unwavering determination, had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The conflict in Albania had become a microcosm of the larger struggle against the Axis powers, a testament to the power of local knowledge and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The ambushes were not merely tactical victories. They were a rallying cry for the Albanian people, inspiring others to join the fight and reinforcing the resolve of those already involved. The shepherds, once seen as simple farmers, had become the architects of a movement that would leave a lasting legacy, demonstrating that even the most ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when united in a common cause. The summer of 1943 marked a turning point in the Albanian resistance, as the shepherds transformed from dismissed peasants into formidable guerrilla fighters. Their knowledge of the land, coupled with their determination to reclaim their homeland, had proven to be a powerful combination. The ambushes had not only disrupted the German supply lines but had also ignited a spirit of defiance among the Albanian people, setting the stage for a sustained campaign against the Axis powers. By June 1943, the Albanian resistance had become a thorn in the side of the Axis powers, a testament to the power of local knowledge and determination. The once dismissed shepherds, armed with little more than their intimate understanding of the rugged terrain, had orchestrated a series of ambushes that left the German command reeling. The disappearance of 11 convoys in a single month was not just a tactical victory, but a psychological blow to the occupiers, who had underestimated the resolve and ingenuity of the Albanian people. The convoys, which had traversed the mountain passes with trepidation, faced the constant threat of attack. The resistance fighters employed guerrilla tactics that were as effective as they were unexpected. The shepherds, who had spent their lives navigating the labyrinthine paths of the Albanian highlands, used this knowledge to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes that left the Germans bewildered. The attacks were meticulously planned, with resistance fighters using the cover of night to position themselves along the convoy routes. Armed with rifles, grenades, and homemade explosives, they struck with precision, targeting the vulnerable supply trucks and leaving the German forces scrambling to respond. The aftermath of each ambush was a scene of chaos, with burning vehicles and scattered supplies marking the success of the resistance. As the losses mounted, the Axis commanders were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The initial disbelief that local peasants could pose such a threat gave way to frustration and anger. Reports from the field painted a grim picture. The supply lines, once considered secure, were now a liability, and the German forces were struggling to maintain their hold on the region. The effect of the resistance was felt far beyond the immediate loss of supplies. The psychological toll on the German troops was significant, as the constant threat of ambush eroded morale and instilled a sense of vulnerability. The once confident occupiers found themselves questioning their safety, even in the heart of their own territory. The German response was swift but ultimately ineffective. Attempts to reinforce the convoys with additional troops only served to stretch their resources thinner, while efforts to root out the resistance fighters proved futile. The shepherds, with their intimate knowledge of the terrain, were able to evade capture, disappearing into the mountains only to strike again when least expected. The region was soon labeled logistically impassable due to locals, a phrase that underscored the effectiveness of the Albanian resistance. The shepherds, who had been dismissed as inconsequential, had demonstrated that their knowledge of the land was a formidable weapon, capable of outsmarting even the most advanced military strategies. The success of the resistance was not just a military victory but a rallying cry for the Albanian people. The stories of the ambushes spread quickly, inspiring others to join the fight and reinforcing the resolve of those already involved. The shepherds, once seen as simple farmers, had become symbols of resilience and defiance, embodying the spirit of a nation determined to resist oppression. As June gave way to July, the Axis powers found themselves grappling with a new reality. The Albanian resistance, born out of necessity and fueled by a deep-seated desire for freedom, had become a force to be reckoned with. The disappearance of the convoys was not just a tactical setback but a harbinger of the challenges to come, as the shepherds continued to defy the odds and rewrite the narrative of their homeland. The German command, now acutely aware of the growing threat, began to implement desperate measures. They launched extensive search operations, deploying patrols into the mountains and conducting sweeps of villages suspected of harboring resistance fighters. However, the shepherds, with their intimate knowledge of the terrain, were able to evade capture, retreating into the rugged landscape where they could regroup and plan their next moves. The resistance fighters also began to employ more sophisticated tactics, utilizing misinformation to mislead the Germans about their movements. They would create false trails and decoys, leading the enemy on wild goose chases while they prepared for their next ambush. This strategic ingenuity further compounded the frustrations of the German commanders, who found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. The psychological impact of the resistance's success was profound. German soldiers, once confident in their superiority, began to question their safety and the effectiveness of their command. The once quiet mountain passes had transformed into a battleground, and the shepherds, once dismissed as inconsequential, had become symbols of resilience and defiance. As the summer of 1943 progressed, the Albanian resistance continued to grow in strength and sophistication. The shepherds, with their deep understanding of the land, devised plans that involved multiple ambushes along the same convoy route, creating a web of attacks that would confuse and demoralize the German forces. They also began to utilize the natural features of the landscape to their advantage, using caves and hidden paths to evade capture and launch surprise attacks. The next major operation was set for early July, targeting a convoy that was expected to carry not only supplies but also reinforcements for the German troops stationed in Albania. The shepherds gathered intelligence on the convoy's route, timing, and composition, meticulously planning their ambush to maximize impact. They knew that this operation could be a game-changer, potentially crippling the German military presence in the region. As the summer of 1943 progressed, the Albanian resistance movement reached a pivotal moment that would define the trajectory of the conflict and the fate of the nation. The series of successful ambushes against German supply convoys had not only disrupted the Axis powers' logistical operations but also ignited a fierce determination among the Albanian people to reclaim their homeland. The consequences of this burgeoning resistance were profound, leading to a cycle of violence that would test the limits of both the occupiers and the occupied. The Axis response to the escalating resistance was swift and brutal. In an attempt to quell the uprising, German commanders ordered punitive expeditions into the Albanian countryside. Villages suspected of harboring resistance fighters became targets for retribution, as the occupiers sought to instill fear and break the will of the local population. Homes were razed, livestock slaughtered, and civilians subjected to harsh interrogations. The German strategy aimed to demonstrate their power and deter further acts of defiance, but it was a strategy fraught with moral dilemmas. For the German soldiers, the orders to carry out such reprisals created a profound conflict. Many were aware that their actions were not just against enemy combatants but against innocent civilians who had been caught in the crossfire of a war they did not choose. The moral weight of their actions weighed heavily on some, leading to a growing sense of disillusionment among the ranks. Reports from the front lines indicated that the brutality of the German response was not only failing to suppress the resistance but was also eroding morale among the troops. Soldiers found themselves questioning the righteousness of their cause, as they witnessed the suffering inflicted upon the very people they were meant to control. Meanwhile, the Albanian resistance fighters, emboldened by their earlier successes, continued to strike back against the German forces. Each act of brutality by the occupiers only served to galvanize the local population, as communities rallied around the resistance fighters. The shepherds, once dismissed as simple farmers, had become symbols of resilience and defiance. They organized themselves into more structured units, coordinating their efforts to launch ambushes and disrupt German operations with increasing frequency and effectiveness. The consequences of the resistance were not limited to the immediate military engagements. The cycle of violence that ensued had far-reaching implications for the social fabric of Albania. Families were torn apart, communities were fractured, and the landscape of the countryside was scarred by the ravages of war. Yet, amidst the chaos, a sense of unity began to emerge among the Albanian people. The shared experience of suffering and resistance fostered a collective identity that transcended regional and tribal divisions, as individuals from diverse backgrounds came together in the fight for their homeland. As the summer wore on, the Axis powers found themselves grappling with the repercussions of their earlier underestimation of the Albanian resistance. The punitive expeditions had failed to achieve their intended goal of breaking the will of the people. Instead, they had only deepened the resolve of the resistance fighters, who continued to launch coordinated attacks against German supply lines. The once secure routes through the mountains had become treacherous, as the shepherds and their allies employed guerrilla tactics that left the occupiers bewildered and frustrated. The psychological toll on the German forces was significant. The constant threat of ambush eroded morale and instilled a sense of vulnerability among the troops. The confidence that had characterized the early days of the occupation was replaced by anxiety and fear, as soldiers began to question their safety even in the heart of their own territory. The German commanders, faced with mounting losses and a growing resistance movement, were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The once dismissed shepherds had become a formidable adversary, capable of outmaneuvering and outsmarting the occupiers at every turn. The turning point of the conflict came in late July 1943, when a particularly audacious ambush resulted in the destruction of a major supply convoy. The attack, meticulously planned and executed by the resistance fighters, left the German command reeling. The loss of supplies and personnel was a significant blow to the Axis war effort, and the psychological impact of the ambush reverberated throughout the ranks. The shepherds, once seen as inconsequential, had demonstrated their ability to disrupt the German military machine, and the consequences of their actions would be felt far beyond the borders of Albania. In the aftermath of the ambush, the German command was forced to re-evaluate its strategy in the region. The punitive expeditions had failed to quell the resistance, and the continued losses were straining their resources. The Axis powers, now grappling with the repercussions of their earlier derision, faced an uphill battle against a populace that had transformed its fear into defiance. The conflict in Albania had become a microcosm of the larger struggle against the Axis powers, a testament to the power of local knowledge and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. As the summer of 1943 drew to a close, the consequences of the resistance movement became increasingly apparent. The shepherds and their allies had not only disrupted the Axis supply lines but had also forged a new sense of national identity among the Albanian people. The struggle for freedom had united individuals from diverse backgrounds, creating a collective resolve that would prove to be a formidable force against oppression. The Axis powers, now grappling with the reality of their situation, found themselves in an increasingly untenable position, as the Albanian resistance continued to gain strength and momentum. The aftermath of the summer of 1943 marked a significant transformation in the Albanian resistance movement. The successful ambushes and the growing unity among the shepherds and villages had not only disrupted the Axis powers' operations but had also fostered a newfound sense of identity and purpose among the Albanian people. The struggle for freedom had become a collective endeavor, transcending regional and tribal divisions to forge a united front against oppression. As the resistance fighters regrouped after their successful ambushes, they began to formalize their efforts. The once loosely organized groups of shepherds and villages transformed into a more structured and coordinated network of fighters. This transformation was driven by necessity. The increasing pressure from the German occupiers demanded a more strategic approach to their operations. The shepherds, with their intimate knowledge of the terrain, became not only scouts and guides but also leaders, rallying others to join the fight for their homeland. The brutality of the German response to the resistance had created a cycle of violence that further entrenched the resolve of the Albanian people. Each act of retribution by the occupiers was met with renewed determination from the resistance fighters. The punitive expeditions, which had aimed to instill fear, instead galvanized the local population, as communities rallied around the resistance and provided support in the form of shelter, food, and intelligence. The transformation of the resistance was not just a military evolution, it was also a cultural and political awakening. The stories of the ambushes and the bravery of the shepherds spread quickly, inspiring others to join the fight and reinforcing the resolve of those already involved. The resistance became a symbol of resilience and defiance, embodying the spirit of a nation determined to resist oppression. The once dismissed shepherds had become the architects of a movement that would leave a lasting legacy. As the conflict continued, the shepherds and their allies began to adopt more sophisticated tactics. They employed guerrilla warfare strategies that allowed them to strike swiftly and then vanish into the mountains, leaving the German forces bewildered and frustrated. The Axis powers, now grappling with the repercussions of their earlier derision, faced an uphill battle against a populace that had transformed its fear into defiance. The mountain passes, once seen as mere transport routes, had become the stage for a burgeoning national identity, as the Albanian people united in their struggle for freedom. The moral dilemmas faced by both the occupiers and the resistance fighters became increasingly pronounced. For the German soldiers, the orders to carry out reprisals against innocent civilians created a profound conflict. Many began to question the righteousness of their cause, as they witnessed the suffering inflicted upon the very people they were meant to control. The brutality of the German response eroded morale among the troops, leading to a growing sense of disillusionment. On the other hand, the resistance fighters grappled with their own moral dilemmas. The struggle for freedom often required them to make difficult choices, balancing the need for military success with the desire to protect their communities. The shepherds, who had once lived in harmony with their neighbors, found themselves in a position where they had to take up arms against an occupying force. The transformation from peaceful farmers to armed fighters was not taken lightly, and the weight of their actions weighed heavily on their consciences. As the summer of 1943 gave way to autumn, the Albanian resistance continued to gain momentum. The success of the ambushes and the unity forged among the shepherds and villages became a source of national pride. The stories of their bravery and ingenuity became ingrained in the national consciousness, inspiring future generations to value their heritage and the power of collective action. The legacy of those shepherds, who once went unnoticed, would serve as a reminder of the strength found in unity and the importance of standing against tyranny. The transformation of the resistance was also marked by a growing sense of solidarity among the various factions involved. The shepherds, once seen as simple farmers, had become symbols of resilience and ingenuity, demonstrating that local knowledge could outsmart even the most advanced military strategies. The Axis forces, now grappling with the repercussions of their earlier derision, faced an increasingly formidable adversary. In the aftermath of the summer of 1943, the landscape of Albania was forever changed. The conflict had not only disrupted the Axis powers' operations but had also fostered a sense of national identity among the Albanian people. The struggle for freedom had united individuals from diverse backgrounds, creating a collective resolve that would prove to be a formidable force against oppression. As the resistance fighters continued to launch coordinated attacks against German supply lines, the Axis powers found themselves in an increasingly untenable position. The once secure routes through the mountains had become treacherous, as the shepherds and their allies employed guerrilla tactics that left the occupiers bewildered and frustrated. The conflict in Albania had become a microcosm of the larger struggle against the Axis powers, a testament to the power of local knowledge and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The enduring legacy of the Albanian resistance would persist long after the war had ended. The successful ambushes and the unity forged among the shepherds and villages became a source of national pride and a symbol of resistance against oppression. In the years that followed, the story of how ordinary Albanians turned the tide against a formidable enemy became ingrained in the national consciousness, inspiring future generations to value their heritage and the power of collective action. As the years passed, the enduring legacy of the resistance continued to inspire and empower, a testament to the power of unity and the strength of the human spirit. The account of the Albanian shepherds, who had once gone unnoticed, became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even the most ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when united in a common cause. The effect of the Albanian resistance against the Axis powers reverberated long after the war ended. The successful ambushes and the unity forged among the shepherds and villages became a source of national pride and a symbol of resistance against oppression. In the years that followed, the story of how ordinary Albanians turned the tide against a formidable enemy became ingrained in the national consciousness, inspiring future generations to value their heritage and the power of collective action. As Albania emerged from the shadows of World War II, the enduring legacy of the resistance fighters was woven into the fabric of the nation's identity. The shepherds, who had once been dismissed as simple farmers, were now celebrated as heroes who had stood against tyranny. Their courage and ingenuity became emblematic of the Albanian spirit, a testament to the power of local knowledge and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. In the immediate aftermath of the war, Albania underwent significant political and social changes. The resistance movement had not only disrupted the Axis supply lines but had also laid the groundwork for a new political landscape. The National Liberation Movement, which had gained momentum during the war, emerged as a dominant force in post-war Albania. The leaders of the resistance, many of whom were former shepherds and villagers, took on prominent roles in the new government, shaping the direction of the nation in the years to come. The enduring legacy of the resistance was also reflected in the cultural sphere. Literature, music, and art began to celebrate the stories of the shepherds and their bravery. Poets penned verses that immortalized the struggles and sacrifices of the resistance fighters, while artists depicted scenes of ambushes and acts of defiance against the occupiers. These cultural expressions served not only as a means of commemoration but also as a way to instill a sense of pride in the Albanian people, reminding them of their shared history and the strength found in unity. Monuments and memorials dedicated to the resistance fighters sprang up across the country. In towns and villages, statues of shepherds holding rifles were erected, symbolizing the courage and resilience of the local population. Annual commemorative events were established, where Albanians would gather to honor the memory of those who had fought for their freedom. These gatherings became a focal point for national pride, reinforcing the narrative of resistance and the importance of standing against oppression. As the years passed, the enduring legacy of the Albanian resistance continued to inspire and empower future generations. The stories of the ambushes and the ingenuity of the shepherds were passed down through families, ensuring that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. Schools incorporated the history of the resistance into their curricula, teaching children about the bravery of their ancestors and the significance of their struggle for freedom. The effect of the resistance extended beyond Albania's borders. The account of the shepherds became a symbol of hope and resilience for oppressed peoples around the world. As countries grappled with their own struggles for independence and self-determination, the Albanian experience served as a powerful reminder that even the most formidable enemy could be defeated by those who refused to give up. The resistance fighters became icons of liberation movements, inspiring activists and leaders who sought to challenge tyranny and injustice. In the context of the Cold War, the enduring legacy of the Albanian resistance took on new dimensions. The country aligned itself with communist ideologies, and the leaders of the post-war government sought to position Albania as a bastion of socialism in Eastern Europe. The narrative of resistance against fascism was intertwined with the broader struggle against imperialism and capitalism, as the Albanian government sought to assert its independence on the global stage. The Shepherds' legacy became a tool for political propaganda, reinforcing the idea that the Albanian people had triumphed over oppression and were now charting their own course. However, the complexities of the post-war era also brought challenges. The authoritarian nature of the communist regime led to repression and censorship, stifling dissent and limiting the freedom of expression. While the enduring legacy of the resistance was celebrated, the government's control over the narrative meant that certain aspects of the struggle were romanticized or oversimplified. The voices of those who had fought for freedom were sometimes overshadowed by the state's agenda, leading to a more homogenized version of history. Despite these challenges, the enduring spirit of the Albanian resistance continued to resonate with the people. The shepherds, with their intimate knowledge of the land and their unwavering determination, had demonstrated that even the most formidable enemy could be defeated by those who refused to give up. Their legacy served as a reminder of the importance of standing up against tyranny and oppression, a lesson that resonated far beyond the borders of Albania. As Albania transitioned to democracy in the early 1990s, the enduring legacy of the resistance underwent a revival. The fall of the communist regime opened the door for a more nuanced exploration of the country's history. Scholars and historians began to re-evaluate the narratives surrounding the resistance, uncovering the complexities and contradictions of the struggle. The stories of individual fighters, including the shepherds who had played pivotal roles in the resistance, were brought to light, adding depth to the understanding of Albania's past. In this new era of openness, the enduring legacy of the resistance became a source of inspiration for a younger generation. The stories of the shepherds and their bravery were celebrated not only as historical accounts, but also as lessons in resilience and the power of collective action. The spirit of the resistance was invoked in contemporary movements advocating for social justice, human rights, and democratic governance, as Albanians sought to honor the sacrifices of their ancestors by continuing Norway's fight for freedom and equality. The enduring legacy of the Albanian resistance also found expression in the diaspora. Albanian communities around the world embraced the stories of their homeland, sharing them with new generations and ensuring that the lessons of the past remained alive. The narratives of the shepherds and their struggle against oppression became a source of pride for Albanians abroad, reinforcing their connection to their roots and their commitment to preserving the cultural heritage. As Albania continues to navigate the challenges of the 21st century, the enduring legacy of the resistance remains a vital part of the national identity. The shepherds, once dismissed as inconsequential, have become symbols of resilience and defiance, embodying the spirit of a nation determined to resist oppression. Their story serves as a reminder that ordinary people, united in a common cause, can achieve extraordinary things. In conclusion, the enduring legacy of the Albanian resistance against the Axis powers is a testament to the power of local knowledge, determination, and unity in the face of adversity. The shepherds, who once went unnoticed, have become icons of resilience, inspiring future generations to value their heritage and the importance of standing up against tyranny. As Albania continues to evolve, the spirit of the resistance endures, reminding all who hear their story that Norway's fight for freedom and justice is a timeless struggle, one that transcends borders and resonates with the human spirit.